Oh boy, did we need that comeback win over the Panthers last night or what?
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoke to Be, and wow, do we have some things to talk about today. It is Wednesday, March 12th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your day. It's available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today we are discussing last night's thrilling, inspiring win over the Florida Panthers, where the Bruins were down 2-0 in the third period, came all the way back in regulation and added a huge exclamation point courtesy of Nikita Zadorov. We'll also touch on some new guys stepping up, as well as conclude our look at Brad Marchand being traded to those very Panthers as he spoke in Boston yesterday, his first day back since the trade on Friday. Just a wild day overall. We'll break it all down here on the podcast. Before we get into it, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. So it's been like 5 days since the NHL trade deadline where the Bruins sold off a bunch of their veterans, some pending unrestricted free agents, and many had written them off as a team to be taken seriously this season. And while the Bruins did come out of the trade deadline with a 4-0 win over the Tampa Bay Lightning, many were looking to last night's game against the Florida Panthers as a measuring stick or as a game in which we would have to reckon with the reality that Brad Marchand is now a member of this team, a team that has bounced the Bruins from the playoffs in each of the past two seasons, won a Stanley Cup in 2024, went to the final the year before that after eliminating the historic Bruins team from the postseason, and it felt like it was just going to be insult added to injury here with the Panthers coming to town. Brad Marchand was in the building, but remained in the locker room after addressing the media earlier in the day. We'll touch on that. And let's be honest, it wasn't looking good for the Black and Gold, who were down 2-0 in the third period until it all turned around. And last night, watching that game, I would have loved to have been in the crowd, obviously, but just watching it from home, you could feel the energy, you could feel the electricity, you could feel that, not burden being lifted, but just some rays of sunshine popping through what has been a bit of a dark and cloudy past few days for Bruins fans. This all came after the Bruins were down 2-0, and there was a loud, very loud Fire Sweeney chant in the stands. But then something started to happen, and you get a power play goal from David Pastrnak to make it 2-1, assisted by the newly acquired Casey Mittelstadt, and also aided by a very deft tip to Mittelstadt by Elias Lindholm. You had a Mason Lohrei goal shortly thereafter, and then you had David Pastrnak feeding Pavel Zacha for the eventual game winner. All these goals came within like less than 8 minutes in the third period, and with the goaltender pulled for the Panthers, Florida pressing for the tying goal, the Bruins were able to keep them at bay and put a huge exclamation point on it by Nikita Zadorov just pummeling Sam Bennett, a guy that our now former captain has befriended or had befriended at the Four Nations face-off. It's a guy that he's going to run into battle with, but we still have very bad feelings about this guy for how he effectively ended Marchand's season last year, for how he had that punch to the face with the stick in his hand, an injurious play, a dirty play that was not penalized. Marchand may have said it's water under the bridge, but for us as Bruins fans, there's still a lot of bad feelings towards this team. And I've said personally, like, Marchand aside, or even with Marchand, it's not like I'm going to be rooting for this team to win in the playoffs so that he can get another cup. I don't want this team to have any more success than they've already had. And Zadorov's fight at the end of this game, the iconic kind of picture that you're seeing all over social media, Bennett desperately grasping out for Pasternak's jersey to try to, I don't even know what he was doing there, but Zadorov in particular, and we'll touch on this a little bit later on in the podcast, but Zadorov stepped up. It's been an up and down season for him in black and gold. It's been an up and down season for the Bruins as a whole, obviously, more downs than ups. But to earn this victory over Florida, to split the season series after losing the first two games, and to come out of the trade deadline with now 2 wins over that Florida team, with the emphasis of that fight to end. It was just amazing. And the vibes are really high right now, even in light of the unlikelihood of making the playoffs, of selling Marchand, Brandon Carlo, Charlie Coyle. And Nikita Zadorov said it well after the game. There's a lot of guys who play with their pride and they play with their heart and they try to prove something for either themselves or management or fans or their teammates. We're playing for something. He said, that's what I see. The guys are showing up. All the guys since Friday have been showing up, Friday being the trade deadline, of course, ready to work their NHL.com framed it as ready to work their butts off. But what he actually said, and I think I can say this on the podcast, ready to work their balls off and play for the crest. There's no quit in this team. And we're going to keep pushing until the end. We're just trying to build the momentum we haven't had the whole year. You get a couple wins, you start feeling great, you feel confident inside the group, and something's brewing for sure. It would have been so easy for the Boston Bruins to kind of fold in on themselves and look at Brad Marchand, Brandon Carlo, Charlie Coyle, Trent Frederick, Justin Brazeau being shipped out, a bunch of new guys coming in. You're still without Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm, who are both injured. And it would have been so easy just to take that cue as the season's over. We'll regroup, try to do better next season. This isn't a team that looks like it's going to win a bunch of games down the stretch, or wasn't going to anyways. But wow. Mason Lohrei reiterating it. We are never going to give up. We know where we're at. We're just going to keep fighting. And you saw it tonight. I've seen Panthers fans on social media. We ended your franchise. You're in a full rebuild. We ended your historic season. We won a cup. We have your captain. And I'm like, congrats. Sorry to hear that. I'm not reading all that. That's your story. I don't really care about your story. All I'm interested in is the Bruins story, how they're handling what is happening in and around the team, how they're taking there's still a lot of guys with skill and pride and drive in that locker room. And these guys are stepping up. They're not about to, as much as we think, they're tanking. I even saw complaints about, they're ruining their chance at getting a lottery pick. As much as you think teams are tanking, it's the players who have that pride. And you're not completely blowing it up. It wasn't a rebuild. This is a retool. The Bruins still understand where they're at in the standings. They understand what happened with the group. Joe Sacco said, there's new players here. It's an opportunity for these guys. Whatever motivates them, if it's the underdog role, taking that on. If it's, I have an opportunity here maybe that I did not have before, they're just trying to pick up that mantle, roll with it, and they did so in very fine fashion. That last night, Mason Lohrei said he hasn't been that fired up in a long time. Talking about the Zadorov and Bennett fight, I mean, I could say the same about watching this team. I hadn't felt that good about watching this team in quite some time. They've been much more entertaining, much more fun to watch since the trade deadline. And they have the Ottawa Senators coming up. Still not looking good for the playoffs. We'll look at some key stats and signals coming up here on the podcast. But that's the type of hockey the Bruins want to play. It's the type of hockey we want to watch as fans. They're not quitting. They're going to battle right to the end. And that's a good sign for this team moving forward. So we'll touch on some stats and signals to take away from last night's game, as well as briefly look at what Brad Marchand was saying earlier in the day here as the podcast continues. When the games tip off around the NBA, the action is just getting started, and March Madness is just around the corner as well. FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got a few underdogs that have caught my eye this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. The FanDuel app is simple and easy to use. When I win, I get paid instantly with no waiting around. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel.com. Now, something that I've been wondering about since the trade deadline is how some of the newer Bruins would react to being added to the team. And not only that, but how some of the Bruins that were added to the club last offseason, namely Nikita Zadorov, Elias Lindholm, would react to having most of the leadership core moved out here. Now, nobody's thinking that either Elias Lindholm or Nikita Zadorov will be named the next captain of this team. That will be either Charlie McAvoy or David Pastrnak. But we talked about the Zadorov fight last night. He and Lindholm, I think, have an opportunity here to assert themselves more than they had in the past. When you come into a new situation and there's already an established hierarchy, already an established culture in the locker room, established leadership core, it may be difficult to really feel as comfortable as you might under different circumstances or with a club that you've been with for quite a while. I mentioned Lindholm last night having that great second effort to maintain puck possession, get it to Casey Mittelstadt, who fed David Pastrnak for the game-winning goal. I've seen him play a bit better over the last couple games. Zadorov, of course, with the fight, he also added an assist in a game-high 22 minutes and almost 22:48 of ice time. I really liked what I've seen from Casey Mittelstadt. He extended his modest 2-game point streak as a member of the Boston Bruins with a assist on that Pastrnak power play goal. The power play looks a bit fresher, and I would like to see Mittelstadt perhaps get some 5-on-5 time with more skilled players and not necessarily, Jacob Lauko, Cole Koepke, although those guys have been bringing some good energy as well. Lauko didn't get an assist on the Mason Lohrei goal, but he was very instrumental in creating some space for that to happen. The Bruins overall were outshot last night, 28-24. Florida got a few near the end to really boost their total. But again, overall, just a fantastic effort for the Bruins. They were led by David Pastrnak, their best player. If they manage to squeak into the playoffs, then he has to be a favorite for the Hart Trophy as league MVP. Mittelstadt, Zaka, Lindholm chipping in points up front, and then Lohrei with the goal, Nikita Zadorov with an assist. Connor Ryan on X posted, we have Zadorov with the fight, that impressive effort, but the pairing of Zadorov and newcomer Henry Jokiharju has also been very effective. They've logged 30 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time, and the Bruins lead in shot attempts 40-20, scoring chances 22-7, high danger scoring chances 7-3, and goals 1-0. Very impressive early showing from that pairing. And again, we have no McAvoy, no Lindholm, your top two defensemen, and they've been able to beat Tampa and Florida here in back-to-back games. If you look at the defense, when those two guys are back, you could have like Lohrei, McAvoy, Lindholm, Peak, Zadorov, Jokiharju. That's a pretty nice top six that you have there once those guys are back, and it won't be till next season that everybody will be healthy because Lindholm is out for the season, of course. I thought Ian Mitchell looked pretty good. He was making some plays out there as well. So these guys, they're looking to make, so in some cases, it's looking to make a good impression on Bruins brass with a view to earning bigger roles next season. For other guys, it's stepping up and asserting themselves as leaders on this team now that there's a void in that area. And while I would still prefer to see, let's say Patrick Brown, maybe Vinny Lettieri sent back to Providence in favor of some of the younger guys who are down there to, continue to work on their game and prepare for the AHL playoffs. I mean, at this point in the season, bring Merkulov back up, bring Patra back up, let Fraser Minton maybe get a look, Fabian Lysell. These are all guys that you need to see what they can do at the NHL level, and there's no better time to do that than right now when you're still playing competitive games, but you're kind of out of it. I know they're looking to make a playoff push. They want to get those extra home dates, but let's be honest, it's not really happening. Right now, The Athletic has the Bruins playoff odds at 3%, which is not great. Money Puck has their playoff odds at 8.5%. Yes, they're only 2 points out of a playoff spot at the moment. But again, it's the games played that are working against them. They only have 16 games remaining, whereas Columbus, who's in the second wildcard spot at 70 points, they have 18 games remaining, as do the Ottawa Senators, who have a 3-point lead on Columbus in the wild card race as well. The Bruins are currently tied with Montreal and the Rangers, 2 points back of Columbus, but the Canadiens have 18 games remaining. The Rangers have 17 games remaining, and the Bruins also have only have 16 games remaining. The Red Wings are only 2 points back of Boston, and they have 2 games in hand. Islanders, 3 points back of the Bruins, and they also have 2 games in hand. If you look at point percentage in the East, the Bruins, there's only 4 teams with lower point percentages. The Bruins would have to leap over the Red Wings, the Rangers, the Canadiens, and one of Columbus or Ottawa in order to jump into a playoff spot. Very unlikely, although the vibes are off the charts at the moment because of last night's game. It's still, we got to be a little bit realistic here. And why not look more to next season and give some of these young guys a look over your Patrick Browns, who took a pretty nasty looking kneeing penalty last night, which fueled the rivalry for sure. I'd like to see at least Merkulov back up, Patra back up. Some of the other new guys have been playing well. I love what I'm seeing from Marat Hudnustinov. It's nice to see Jacob Lauko back in the mix. I think Jeremy Swayman really loves having him back in particular as one of his good buddies. those guys have looked like Newcomers. He's got some silky mitts. He can skate. He and Mittelstadt in particular, even Lauko, bringing a healthy measure of speed into the lineup, and the Bruins are better off for it. What a game last night. Before the game, though, it was Brad Marchand's return to Boston, and we'll touch on what he said yesterday. The Bruins will be next in action on Thursday. It's a game in Ottawa against the Senators, who are pretty hot right now. And again, a 3-point cushion in the wild card race. Won't get any easier for the Bruins as they'll take on Tampa, then Buffalo before heading out on a road trip next week, over the next couple weeks. That will take them out west. Tough road schedule for this team coming up, but technically still alive. And we'll continue to cover and root for this team every single day here on Locked On Boston Bruins. Let's touch on that Marchand media availability here as the podcast continues. If you're looking to hire, you quite simply need Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored job posts put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. I've been in a spot where I needed the right hire, like yesterday. The pressure's on. Every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly why Indeed's sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. You can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Boston Bruins. Terms and conditions apply, but if you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Yesterday on Locked On Bruins, we took a look at Brad Marchand's comments from his introductory press conference in Florida on Monday. Tuesday, of course, he was back in Boston with the Panthers. He took the morning skate, and many were thinking, is this guy actually going to play after Don Sweeney had said he's still out another 3 to 4 weeks? He is still out. He watched the game reportedly from the Panthers locker room. According to Ty Anderson of 98.5, they did have a video teed up in case he was in the press box, say, where they could shine a spotlight on him and give the crowd a chance to have an ovation. They'll probably save that for when he comes back to TD Garden on the ice or in a different capacity. But he did talk to the media on Tuesday, and again, talked about his disappointment, about his time in Boston ending, about the fact that they were not, or he did not have kind of that fairy tale ending in Boston. He knew there was a window, that they maxed it out. They had their opportunity a couple years ago, and they fell short. They definitely dropped the ball on that one. He said that was our year. Management went all in the years leading up to that and that season. When you look at an opportunity like that, it doesn't come along very often. So, I mean, good on Marchand for kind of putting the onus of that failure on the players. Maybe the coaching came into it as well, with Jim Montgomery being a big green when it came to playoff coaching and maybe not pushing the right buttons or making some line switches, goaltending decisions that were not the best. But he was, again, very complimentary of Don Sweeney, Cam Neely, and, you know, when you're effectively let go from an organization, it's very easy to talk trash or to have ill will, bad feelings, burn bridges even, but he's kept that bridge open in the event that they recircle back in the offseason. The Bruins wanted to do right by Marchand, he said. They also had to make sure they did their job, so that's why we got that trade to Florida. If the Bruins had been in a playoff spot last week, the likelihood of him being traded was greatly reduced. But when you see Marchand saying, not necessarily eliminating the possibility of re-signing in the summer, you start to think, well, maybe this could happen. But I don't really think that it will, because once he gets down there, once he becomes part of the, like, think about him last night in the locker room watching that game. You think of all the feelings of being captain of the Boston Bruins after having lost to the Panthers in the past couple of years in the playoffs, the ill will, the bad feelings, the rivalry that is there now. And you think about, is he proud of his Bruins teammates? Is he disappointed for his new Panthers teammates? Is he going to try to find a way to rally them after this loss, where it's kind of like you were just battling with those guys a couple of weeks ago, rooting for them? He wasn't necessarily closing the door. He said he doesn't know what the future brings in terms of how it plays out in the summer. Can things change down the road? Potentially, in terms of the gap that existed between the Bruins and Brad Marchand in terms of valuation. He was looking for something along the lines of what Elias Lindholm is making, which with the cap going up seems reasonable. But then you also look at the fact that he's 37 years old, and you want to look at Steven Stamkos in Nashville. He's younger, and they paid him $8.5 million, and he's not had a great season at all. And they still have 3 more years left on that deal. Maybe it's a matter of him getting used to the new surroundings, as Elias Lindholm is. So maybe we can give him a bit of a pass there. But at the end of the day, Marchand said, I mean, obviously I would still, and then he paused and then added, it doesn't change my love for the city, and the will to want to be here has never changed. It will probably never change. It's just whether they can have a meeting of the minds and kind of come together, but it's to be seen. So it's still possible. He's not burning bridges. He's keeping the door open. I do believe there are more bad feelings inside than he's willing to let on publicly. He wants to win. He's a competitor. As are the Bruins. He would have loved to have had that incredible fairy tale ending, but the Bruins are doing what's right for them at the moment. He said they can't choose one guy over the 20 guys and, frankly, the millions of people that support the team. You owe it to the guys that are on the team here that are young and the guys that just signed with the organization to build a cup contending team. It's not a personal thing. I never let it get personal. He's kind of talking there about Zadorov and Lindholm and guys that signed with the organization to contend for the cup, probably thinking that Brad Marchand would be there for the foreseeable future. It's now more their team than it was last week, and the early returns have been pretty good. I mean, I feel for Brad. I feel for his family that has to move. I guess his family's going to stay in Boston for the balance of the school year at least, and then they'll see what happens in the summer. I really wish things had gone differently this season. But at the same time, when you look at the Charlie Coyle trade, you look at how good and the energy that Casey Mittelstadt has brought to the lineup so far. I'm super pumped about him, along with a second-round pick and a top prospect. You look at trading Brandon Carlo, bringing in Henry Jokiharju as a replacement, and getting a first from the Leafs, plus Fraser Minton. You look at trading Justin Brazeau and bringing back Jacob Lacko and bringing in Marat Udnusnidov. I mean, come on. That is very good work from Don Sweeney. And it was kind of ironic that the comeback started last night after those loud Fire Sweeney chants. Those jeers quickly turned into cheers, and the crowd was fired up. As I was watching the game with my kid, who was like half falling asleep beside me. He woke right up when the Bruins scored their third goal, saw the fight, and even he was getting into it. I mean, it was such a fun game to watch amid all the negative vibes around this team lately. We still root for this team, and we still talk about them every day here on Locked On Boston Bruins, win or lose, retool or contenders. That's what we do here on the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. Tomorrow we will preview the game coming up against the Ottawa Senators. We'll bring you all the latest on the black and gold. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast over the last few days. Please do subscribe on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube if you have not already. And check out Locked On NHL Next. You get league-wide stories from our local experts, all expert analysis on the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you again here tomorrow.